Hello everyone, Lucky here, and after a brief hiatus, I have returned to the recording life for WPF Season 8, and I will be presenting you guys with my draft analysis. Now, for any of you that saw my draft analysis breakdown for the UPL Season 10 before I had to stop recording for a bit, I am going about doing these draft analysis slightly different, just to change it up a bit and do something different than from, the tried and true good method of just going directly through your picks and talking about each pick individually. So, for those of you who haven't seen it, how this is going to look is shortly after I finish this intro, I'm going to reveal my whole team and in what rounds I took them, and then I'm going to give a brief overview of kind of when I took each Pokemon and then why I grabbed that Pokemon at that specific spot. Sometimes it would be because I had to, or because I was afraid of losing it, or some other reason. And that's just going to be a really brief overview of the team. Then after I talk about why I did my picks when I did them, then I'm going to go in an in-depth analysis of each of the Pokemon. But most of the time I'm not going to be talking about them individually. I'm going to talk about them, how they work together as a team. And I think that's the better way of doing draft analysis, just because when you're drafting your team, you're drafting it to plan on them working together. You're not necessarily drafting for that individual Pokemon. And I'm hoping to kind of also do a little bit of teaching on how I build out my drafts, because I've consistently have drafts that other people in the league regard as some of the better drafts, and so I think I'd like to be able to kind of share that knowledge and show my thinking of how I go about planning a whole draft and not just individual picks. So with that being said, let's get into the team that I drafted. So I had third pick overall in this draft, which is pretty early, and normally I'd be ecstatic about that, except for my last two drafts, the mons that I usually draft early in Tapu Koko and Tornadus T, that have an early pick, both drafts, so yeah, I didn't want to use those right away again. So instead, from the beginning, I had my eyes on Tapu Fini that I was going to pick, and I was able to pick at pick 3 overall. Was it a little early? Yes, I did pass on Speed Boost Blaziken, which may or may not have just one season. Who knows? I might regret that, but I just really wanted to use Tapu Fini. And the goal would have been to get a core of Tapu Fini, Zapdos, and then like Nidoqueen, and that's one of my favorite cores ever, is Tapu Fini, Zapdos, and then a bulky ground. Unfortunately, Zapdos was the first of many snipes in the first round. Zapdos went. I was like, cool, maybe I can get Gliscor. That went. Then Lando T went. And then Mega Venusaur went the pick right before me. And there were a couple other picks like Mega Lopunny and Mega Gallade that were pipe dreams that also went before me. So needless to say, the first round had a lot of snipes. However, round 2, Mew was there, and I decided, I can't pass this up. It's not going to make it back around through the turn, likely. And I was like, that's, if someone picks the Mega I wanted, so be it. I'll just punt on it, grab something late. But luckily, round 3, no one did, and I was able to grab Mega Charizard X because a bunch of Megas has gone, and at this point, I was not in love with many of the Megas at all, so I didn't want to wait and risk that it could possibly get sniped from me. So round 4, I was planning on targeting Scizor. Unfortunately, the pick before me again, just like what happened to Mega Venusaur, Pardus decided to pick Scizor, so that's 2 snipes right before me. I was very annoyed at that point. I was, the first few rounds I got fucked with the whole sniping thing. But after that, I was able to kind of be like, okay, this is how things are going to go. I'm just going to grab Lando I here because it pairs well with Fini, and I did not want to risk losing it. think then I would have been down to like maybe having to pick Gligar in Tier 4, which I didn't really like because it didn't do much damage. So I ended up grabbing Lando T there, even though it may have gone back around. The one mon I knew I would still be around in round 5 was Escavalier. Again, I had to pick that here, maybe a little bit early, but I didn't want to risk losing it. And that's kind of a theme with a few of these picks, is pick it early so I don't risk losing it. So then round 6 it came around, and I knew my targets for round 6 and 7 was Greninja and Amoonguss. Amoonguss kind of being the Mega Venusaur replacement, pair with Feeny. I did just use Amoonguss in the UPL season. However, it's more of just like, you know, a glue member of the team. It's not like the main thing, so you don't like plan your teams around an Amoonguss necessarily, and so I'm fine with repeating on that. And looking at the 2 picks, pick 1 and 2, before it got back to me, both of them had water types. Greninja's not a bulky water, so they could have picked it, but either way, I didn't want to risk Amoonguss going, and so I was like, Amoonguss is more important than Greninja. I would have really liked Greninja, but Amoonguss was the more important one, so I made sure to grab that first. And then coming around, no one did grab Greninja, so I was able to pick that for the team. And then coming back around, round 8, I was able to grab Cryogonal, which I'm glad I did. It sniped a lot of people. Although I think it may have still been around had it come back. I'm not sure. But either way, I had to pick it there. It's one of the better Tier 5, so it usually goes quick. I personally like Articuno better, but how the team is forming, I needed the speed that Cryogonal gave, so I picked that there. Around 9, right before it, I was thinking, oh, I'm going to hate myself and grab Blissey, or I could grab Umbreon. And then I was looking around, I was like, oh, P2's there. Sure, it doesn't get the wish that those 2 get, but it's got its own reliable recovery. It just takes a lot of bulk, and it actually does damage. So that was there, kind of finishing up the team. And then coming back up for my last 2 picks, I picked Hitmonchan before Jolteon. Those were the 2 I knew I wanted. But Hitmonchan, the 2 people, so the person who had first overall pick, who I ended up sniping, with Hitmonchan, they couldn't afford a Tier 4, so I knew Jolteon would be safe there. And also, the person who had second pick, she had like a Tier 1 and a Tier 3 that she could draft, so I didn't think she'd draft a Tier 4 and waste points. So I grabbed Hitmonchan first, gave me another Rapid Spinner, and filled the speed gap that I was developing quite well, and then Jolteon I grabbed last to get some speed. So that is the team I grabbed and why I did the rounds. And now I will get into more of in-depth kind of talking about the team a little bit more. So first off, we have the type cores that everyone usually talks about, the main ones in the Fire, Water, Grass core and the Fairy, Dragon, Steel core. Now, Tapu Fini and Charizard both count for 2/3 of each core. So that's kind of neat. It allowed more space, more in the rest of my building. Amoonguss pairs well with Tapu Fini, especially because it resists electric and obviously the grass, 4 times resists the grass. Those are 2 of Tapu Fini's weaknesses, and it's neutral to the poison. Escavalier, that was supposed to be a Scizor, but it still pairs very well with Tapu Fini and Mega Charizard X, only having that one fire weakness, which is 4 times resisted by Mega Charizard and resisted by Fini. So yeah, there's also the lesser Psychic fighting Dark core, which I did manage to get, but that's a little bit lesser. That's just an added on one. These are the main cores. So next up, excellent pairing I was talking about. Now this was hopefully going to be Tapu Fini, Zapdos, and a Bulky Ground. However, Tapu Fini and Landorus Eye just pair really well together. So Tapu Fini's 3 weaknesses are Electric, Landorus is immune to, Poison, Landorus resists, and Grass, which Landorus is useful or is neutral to, because of its flying typing. And then Landorus's 2 weaknesses are Ice 4 times and Water, which Tapu Fini resists both of those. So now you can kind of see this is why I was planning on or wanting Gliscor, because Gliscor has the same thing as with Landorus, though it's a little bit more bulky. So once I could get a couple of the picks that I was sniped, like with Zapdos and Gliscor and Landorus T and Mega Venusaur, those were all kind of meant to pair with Tapu Fini, and I did still kind of get that paired with Tapu Fini with Landorus Eye. However, with my second round pick of Mew, that then became more of the focus of the draft as I was going for. Speaking of focus on the draft, we have Tapu Fini a little bit and Mew. So with both of these, they're very versatile and can run a lot of sets, but they're often forced into running specific sets. So with both of these going forward in the draft, I kind of wanted to make sure that they're not forced into a specific role each week. So both of them are excellent defoggers, but I don't want to have them run defog. And especially with me having a Charizard, teams are going to bring rocks a lot, and I'm going to want to try to get rid of the rocks. So I wanted to make sure going forward that I'm going to have a lot of hazard removal so they don't have to do that. Both of them are monsters defensively and can take a bunch of hits. I didn't want to force them into being defensive, so I made sure I grabbed a few other defensive checks that could check other mons so that these don't have to run defensive any week if I don't want them to. They have a little bit more freedom. They're more free to run like Scarf or Setup or something like that, as long as they're not forced into a defensive role. And I was kind of trying to, with this draft, kind of trying to take advantage of the versatility that Mew and Tapu Fini can offer. So as I said earlier, the defensive backbone, in addition to Tapu Fini and Mew, which I talked about earlier, the other 3 main kind of defensive mons are Amoonguss, Porygon 2, and Aselgor. Now, Porygon 2 doesn't have any actual resists, but just based off its bulk with its Eviolite on, it's basically just an Omni resist besides fighting, which Amoonguss resists. I know you might be thinking, oh, Amoonguss with Tapu Fini. In UPL, I'm through 11 weeks of battling. I think I've had Spore on Amoonguss twice and clicked it once, so I don't necessarily use it that much. Though the threat is there, and also terrain won't be up the entire time. There'll be times where terrain's not up. I just have to be mindful that if I have my terrain up, I can't click Spore. And if I'm bringing Spore in a week, to be mindful of the terrain. But the terrain also really helps out Porygon 2, because one of the main ways people like to deal with P2 is to go ahead and hit it with Toxic. Well, can't do that if the mystery terrain's up. Also, Tapu Fini could take a knockoff pretty well, so there's a few things that are pairing well with this team. Mew, Amoonguss, and Tapu Fini all take the fighting hits that people would like to hit P2 with, and even my Steel type in Scavalier is not weak to fighting. So my team's pretty good against fighting types, I think, so P2 has the potential to be a nuisance and just kind of take hits, teleport out, get into some of my other threats. Speaking of getting in and out, I've got a bunch of pivoters. So those 3 I have at the top, Greninja, Landorus Eye, and Jolteon, those are my fast pivoters that I can go ahead and just based on their natural speed, or if I have it scarfed, I could just go ahead and U-turn out or volt switch out and get into something else. Either one of my big threats, a better matchup. I could just always keep the momentum up. So that's what those three are. Then Mew obviously has a bunch of pivoting options, and but slightly slower. And then you got Porygon 2 with the teleport added. And then I have a Moongus there, because even though it doesn't get a pivoting move, it does have Regenerator, and just by nature of having Regenerator, you can easily just switch it in, take a hit, double out. It's very safe doubles because you just regenerate off that health again. So the goal of these pivots is to pivot around until I could get into an optimal matchup to either set up and sweep or hit something hard, and yeah, it's just take hits, pivot out, or pivot out before I have to take hits. Speaking of then I wanted to make sure, speaking of sweepers, I wanted to make sure I had some hazards, and again with the versatility, so I wanted to make sure Mew and Tapu Fini weren't the only hazard removers. Mew wasn't the only hazard setter. So I have both types of spikes on Greninja, and I have Stealth Rocks on Landorus Eye, in addition to having Stealth Rocks on Mew. And I do think Stealth Rocks are a little bit less important for the most part now, unless you have a Charizard or Mega Charizard on your team, because if you don't have a Mega, that most of the other mons weak to rocks now just go ahead and throw boots on there. So you're going to end up getting more damage throughout a game from spikes, I think. So that was part of the reason I really wanted Greninja. In addition, it gave me good speed and priority, which I was lacking a little bit of at that time in the draft, though I did patch that up. Mew has priority, and Hitmonchan obviously has a bunch of priority. So yeah, and as you can see, I have a Mega Charizard X on my team, which technically does get defog, though in Mega form, it's probably not going to defog for itself. That's the thing you're going to want to defog for. However, I have 5 of the other, half of the remaining mons besides Charizard have hazard removal, so that shouldn't be too much of an issue. Cryogonal actually gets both forms of hazard removal in Rapid Spin and Defog. 95% of the time, I'll probably run Rapid Spin on Cryogonal, but if my opponent one week has a team that's fairly weak to Ice, but a good Ghost type that can come in and Spin Glock, maybe I'll go ahead and throw Defog on that. Who knows? So yeah, I have a decent amount of removal for my Charizard. And last, but this whole team is kind of aiming up to try to get to, besides being versatile with the Tapu Fini and Mew, is hoping that one of my setup sweepers can come in. I have 3 pretty threatening setup sweepers in Mega Charizard X. Mew can set up however it wants, and Lando I mean, it has less attack than Lando T, but higher speed and higher special attack. And you know how much of a threat that Lando T can be, and it gets both Swords Dance and Rock Polish. So I have the double potential for double dance. So kind of the goal of this team was pivot around, set some hazards up, take some hits, and try to get an opportune position for my sweepers to come up and clean the game. Also, with the team, I wanted to make sure to be very versatile and make sure that Mew and Fini can shine and don't have to be forced into a specific role the whole time. So here's the team again. Gone by showing their speed. I think I have pretty good speed tiers. The biggest gap is between Greninja and the Cryogonal there. But there's not a whole lot of Pokemon, I don't think, that fit in the gap that they would be able to run Adamant to outspeed a Cryogonal. And like Jolly Cryogonal, and I don't know. I don't think there's a lot that could really run that risk between Greninja and Cryogonal. So yeah, this is kind of seeing the whole team again. Seeing how things go together. Charizard X, you might be wondering, again, I forgot to mention this, that it's Tapu Fini's Misty Terrain weakens Charizard X's Dragon moves. That is true, but I don't always have to run a Dragon move. You know, a lot of time I could just run the Fire move. So I have a little bit of a Trick Room option down there with P2 and Escavalier if I wanted it. Yeah, and actually, something I forgot to mention was saying the great pairing between Fini and Lando I is, although Lando T's bulk is helped out by its Intimidate. Obviously, Intimidate's a better ability than Sand Force, which on this team, Lando I basically doesn't have an ability. But Lando I actually has the same bulk stats as Lando T, so that's something to keep note of. And yeah, so this is the team. I think I did a pretty good job at making sure that Fini and Mew are not stuck into any certain roles, and also did a pretty good job at filling all of the roles I wanted. I think I've got a decent spread of physical and special attackers. You know, I've got things like Greninja and Lando I that can hit decently hard without setting up. Charizard, if I don't have an opportunity to set up, can just come in and start clicking buttons. So, but I do have the opportunity to set up and just take the game, or if things really need to come down to it, I wouldn't say, I mean, I could run a pretty defensive team. Not necessarily stally, but pretty defensive with like a Mew, Tapu Fini, Porygon 2, and Amoonguss, and Excel, and not Selgor, Slowbug, Scavalier. So that's the team. Let me know what you guys think, and we'll be gunning for a championship this season. See you guys later for my week 1 battle.